The stench of unwashed bodies and industrial waste hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Alara kept her eyes downcast, watching droplets of condensation fall from rusted pipes overhead to form murky puddles on the concrete floor. The auction block beneath her bare feet was slick with grime, and the chains around her wrists and ankles bit into her skin with each small movement. Next up, we have something special. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the din of the crowded slave market. A rare find from the upper echelons of Lyra 7 society. Look at those high cheekbones, that aristocratic bearing, even beneath those scars. The crowd murmured, and Alara felt dozens of eyes crawling over her skin. She had once been beautiful, once commanded respect in diplomatic halls across 3-star systems. But that was before Valerius. Before her husband had systematically stripped away everything. Her position, her dignity, her future. A minor genetic imperfection, they say. The auctioneer continued with mock sympathy, gesturing to the brand that marred Alara's shoulder, the mark that declared her defective. Such a shame. But their loss is your gain. Who needs a perfect breeding specimen when you can have an exotic plaything? Alara's mind retreated to its familiar sanctuary of numbness. The memories threatened to surface. Valerius' rage when their political marriage failed to secure the alliance he'd wanted, his public denunciation when the routine genetic screening had found a minor sequence variation. The beatings had come later, then the humiliation, and finally, that terrible day in the medical chamber when he'd watched with cold eyes as they ensured she would never bear children. "We'll start the bidding at 500 credits, the auctioneer announced. The bidding began, a blur of shouts and electronic pings. Alara had stopped hoping for mercy long ago. In a Tartarus belt, mercy was a luxury no one could afford. She watched a man in the third row. His eyes never left her, and something in his expression made her stomach tighten. One of Valerius' agents, perhaps, ensuring she ended up somewhere especially brutal. 1,500 to the gentleman in the back, the auctioneer called, pointing to the suspicious man. Going once. 10,000. The crowd fell silent. Alara's head jerked up despite her resolve to remain impassive. A tall figure stood at the back of the room, half hidden in shadows. His voice had been quiet, almost reluctant, but the amount was unmistakable. I'm sorry, sir, the auctioneer stammered. Did you say 10,000 credits? The figure stepped forward. He was rugged, weathered by space travel and hard living. His dark hair was tied back carelessly, and his clothes were those of a working spacer, sturdy, patched in places, chosen for function rather than fashion. A captain's insignia, tarnished with age, adorned his jacket. "You heard me," he said, his voice low and rough. 10,000. The suspicious bidder looked furious, but didn't counter. No one did. The amount was preposterous for a discarded noble with no reproductive value. "Sold," the auctioneer shouted, barely containing his glee at the unexpected windfall. "To Captain Kalen," the man said, approaching the platform with long, measured strides. "Just Kalen." Alara's heart hammered against her ribcage as her new owner paid and received the electronic transfer of her ownership documents. His face was impossible to read. No lust, no cruelty, but no kindness either. Just a focused intensity that unsettled her more than open malice would have. When he took her arm to lead her away, his grip was firm but not painful. That, somehow, was the most terrifying thing of all. What new torment awaited her that this man needed to preserve her for now? The docking bay, where Kalen's ship was berthed, smelled of fuel and metal, a sharp contrast to the fetid slave market. Alara stumbled as they approached the vessel, her legs weak from days of standing and holding cells. The ship was old, a mid-range cargo hauler that had seen better decades. Its hull was patched in multiple places, and the name Nomad was painted on its side in faded letters. "Watch your step," Kalen said, steadying her with a hand that withdrew the instant she regained her balance. Inside, the ship was cramped but surprisingly well-maintained. The corridors were narrow, the metal walls lined with exposed conduits and piping. Every available space was utilized for storage or equipment. "This way," Kalen said, leading her to a small room just off the main corridor. He unlocked her restraints with a universal key, his movements efficient and impersonal. Alara tensed, waiting for the inevitable. Her muscles coiled, ready for flight or fight, though experience had taught her both were futile. Instead, Kalen stepped back and gestured to the room. "You'll sleep here. There's a washroom through that door. Get cleaned up. I'll bring food." He turned to leave, then paused. "The ship locks from the bridge. Don't try to access the control systems or communications. It won't work, and I don't want to have to restrain you." The door closed behind him, and Alara heard no lock engage. She stood frozen in place, waiting for the trap to spring. When nothing happened, she cautiously explored her surroundings. The room was small but clean, a narrow bunk with fresh linens, a small cabinet, and a tiny desk built into the wall. The adjoining washroom contained basic toiletries and a shower stall barely large enough to turn around in. On the desk sat a first aid kit. Alara's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were antiseptics, bandages, and dermal regeneration patches. Basic but effective medical supplies. Not tools of torture. Not what she had expected. When Kalen returned an hour later, she had showered and dressed in the simple clothes she'd found in the cabinet. They were too large but clean. She sat rigidly on the edge of the bunk, her wet hair leaving dark patches on her shoulders. He set a tray on the desk, synthetic protein, steamed vegetables, and a cup of water. Simple fare, but more than she'd had in days. "Eat," he said. "We break atmosphere in 20 minutes. Ship sold. The gravity might fluctuate during ascent." He turned to leave again. "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop herself. Kalen paused, his back to her. For a long moment, he said nothing. "Eat your food," he finally replied, and left. Days passed in a strange, tense routine. Kalen brought meals 3 times daily, checked her healing wounds with clinical detachment, and otherwise left her alone. He answered practical questions with minimal words, but ignored any attempt to understand his motives. Alara watched him carefully, studied his movements, listened to his footsteps in the corridor. She tested boundaries cautiously, wandering into the common area when he was on the bridge, examining the cargo manifest left on the galley table. Each time, she waited for punishment that never came. On the 5th day, a sudden power fluctuation sent the ship lurching. Alara was thrown against a wall, and the lights dimmed to emergency red. The ship stabilized moments later, but the main engine's hum had changed to an uneven stutter. Kalen's voice came over the intercom. "Stay in your room." Alara hesitated, then walked to the bridge instead. The door was open, and Kalen was hunched over the navigation console, his face illuminated by blinking warning lights. "I said stay in your room," he growled without looking up. "The primary cooling system is overloading," Alara said, scanning the diagnostics displayed across the screens. "You need to reroute through the secondary loop." Now he did look up, surprise briefly crossing his features. "You know ships. I know Lyran technology." She gestured to the manufacturer's logo embossed on the control panel. "Your auxiliary systems are Lyran-made. The cooling architecture is distinctive." Kalen hesitated, then moved aside. "Show me." Alara stepped forward, her fingers dancing across the unfamiliar console with growing confidence. "The problem is here. The load distribution protocol is corrupted. We need to manually balance the thermal exchange." They worked together for an hour, Alara guiding the process, while Kalen implemented the changes, his stronger hands managing the physical adjustments to the hardware. When the engines finally returned to their normal pitch, a tense silence fell between them. "Where did you learn about ship systems?" Kalen asked, wiping coolant from his hands. Alara shrugged. "I was born into the diplomatic corps. We traveled constantly. My mother thought it prudent I understand how our vessels functioned in case of emergency." "Your mother sounded wise." "She was," Alara said, the past tense hanging heavy in the air. Later, in the galley, Kalen prepared a meal for both of them, the first time they had eaten together. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Alara finally broke it. "Why did you buy me?" Kalen continued eating, his eyes on his plate. Just as she decided he wouldn't answer, he spoke. "I didn't like the alternatives." "What does that mean?" He set down his fork. I recognize the other bidder. Works for a mining operation in the Ceres Reach. They use people until there's nothing left. His jaw tightened. They're efficient. So you spent 10,000 credits on what? Charity. Call it what you want. What do you want from me? Kaylin's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something besides careful neutrality in them, a flash of old pain. Nothing you don't want to give. 3 days later, they docked at a neutral trading post on the edge of the Tartarus Belt. The station was a ramshackle affair, cobbled together from salvaged ship parts and prefabricated modules. It serviced smugglers and legitimate traders alike, asking no questions as long as station fees were paid. I need to resupply, Kaylin told her as they prepared to disembark. You can stay aboard if you prefer. Alara considered the offer. Stay in the safety of the familiar ship or venture into the unknown station. The choice itself was a novelty, one that made her throat tight with unexpected emotion. I'll come, she decided. The trading post's main concourse buzzed with activity. Merchants hawking wares, spacers drinking at makeshift bars, deals being negotiated in shadowy corners. Alara stayed close to Kaylin, acutely aware of the stares they attracted. Her scars marked her as damaged goods, and Kaylin's protective stance beside her raised eyebrows. At a parts dealer's stall, Kaylin haggled over replacement coolant valves. While he was distracted, a burly man sidled up to Alara. How much for an hour with your slave, Captain? He asked Kaylin, his eyes never leaving Alara's body. Alara froze, old terror rising like bile in her throat. Kaylin turned slowly. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture had shifted. She's not for sale or rent. Everyone has a price, the man persisted, reaching for Alara's arm. Kaylin moved with unexpected speed. Suddenly the man was pinned against a support beam, Kaylin's forearm across his throat. She's not merchandise, Kaylin said, his voice deadly quiet. Touch her again, and you'll lose the hand. The man slunk away when released, and Kaylin returned to his transaction as if nothing had happened. But Alara had seen something crucial. The barely controlled rage in his eyes hadn't been directed at her. It had been for her. That night, alone in her room aboard the Nomad, Alara stared at the ceiling and confronted a terrifying possibility. Maybe Kaylin truly meant her no harm. The next morning, she found Kaylin in the cargo hold, inventorying supplies. She watched him work for a moment before speaking. Valerius wasn't always cruel, she said, the words tumbling out unbidden. At first, he was merely indifferent. The marriage was political, I understood that. But when the genetic screening revealed the flaw in my DNA sequence, she touched the brand on her shoulder unconsciously. It was minor, a recessive trait that might have caused colorblindness in male offspring. Nothing that couldn't be corrected. But for him, it was proof I was unworthy of his bloodline. Kaylin set down his inventory tablet and leaned against a crate, giving her his full attention. The public humiliation came first, she continued. He needed everyone to know I was the problem, not him. Then the physical punishments, always where they wouldn't show when I was dressed. The brand came later, after I tried to contact my family for help. Her voice caught. They'd already disowned me. The political embarrassment was too great. The sterilization? Kaylin asked quietly. Alara's hand moved to her abdomen. His final insurance. Even if I escaped, I would never bear children who might threaten his pure lineage. She laughed bitterly. He sold me because killing me would have required explanation. This way, I simply disappeared. Kaylin was silent for a long moment. Then he rolled up his sleeve, revealing a series of numbers tattooed on his forearm. Prisoner ID. Orion Corporation Labor Camp. 7 years for industrial espionage, their term for flying too close to a corporate mining operation. Alara moved closer, examining the faded tattoo. How did you get out? Prison transport was hit by raiders. In the chaos, a few of us escaped. His eyes darkened with memory. My wife and daughter weren't as lucky. They died in the camp while I was in solitary. I'm sorry, Alara whispered. Kaylin rolled his sleeve down. Corporations, noble houses, different uniforms, same rot underneath. That night, a nightmare woke Alara screaming. She was back in Valerius' mansion, strapped to the medical table, watching the sterilization laser descend. The door to her room slid open, and Kalen appeared, concern etched on his face. He made no move to enter. "I'm fine," she gasped, fighting to slow her breathing. "Just memories." Kalen nodded. "I have those too." He hesitated. "Would you like some tea?" "Helps sometimes." In the galley, they sat in companionable silence, sipping herbal tea. Kalen had added a splash of something stronger to both cups, a luxury he rarely indulged in. "Thank you," Alara said, meaning more than the tea. "For what it's worth," Kalen said slowly, "what he did to you, it wasn't your fault." A simple truth, but hearing it spoken aloud broke something inside her. The tears came suddenly, violently, years of suppressed grief pouring out. Kalen didn't touch her, didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply remained present, a steady anchor in the storm. When her tears finally subsided, she felt hollow, but somehow lighter. Kalen refilled her cup without comment, his quiet acceptance more healing than any words could have been. The proximity alert blared 2 weeks later, jerking them, both from sleep. Alara reached the bridge seconds after Kalen, her heart racing. "What is it?" Kalen's face was grim as he studied the scanner. "Military-grade pursuit vessel, coming in fast. Guild markings, but the transponder is suspicious." A chill ran down Alara's spine. Valerius. Probably. Kalen's hands flew across the controls, plotting an evasive course. He must have traced the auction records. The Nomad shuddered as her engines strained to maximum output. The pursuing ship gained steadily, its superior speed undeniable. "We can't outrun them," Kalen muttered. "Then we hide." Alara pointed to the navigational display. "The Cressida Nebula. The ionic interference will blind their sensors." "And ours," Kalen warned. "Navigation in there is suicide without specialized equipment." "I've done it before," Alara said. "Diplomatic missions sometimes required discretion. I know the old smugglers' routes." Kalen hesitated only a moment before altering their course. "Show me." The nebula loomed ahead, a swirling maelstrom of gases and cosmic dust, beautiful and deadly. As they plunged into its outer edges, the ship's sensors began to falter, screens filling with static. "Cut power to all non-essential systems," Alara instructed. "Minimal life, support only. They'll be looking for our energy signature." Working in tandem, they guided the Nomad deeper into the nebula's embrace. Visibility dropped to near zero, the viewport showing only swirling crimson and violet clouds. Alara called directions from memory, and Kalen executed them with unerring precision. "There," she whispered, pointing to a barely visible dark patch amid the gas clouds. "That's a gravity pocket. The density creates a natural hiding place." They powered down further, drifting silently into the void. For hours, they waited in the dim emergency lighting, speaking in hushed tones, sensors tuned to detect any pursuit. "If they find us here, we're trapped," Kalen observed. "Better trapped than caught," Alara replied. "You haven't seen what Valerius does to those who defy him." Kalen studied her face in the low light. "You're not going back to him, not while I'm breathing." The simple declaration hung between them, its implications vast. Alara reached across the console, her fingers brushing against his. Kalen's hand turned, clasping hers gently. The proximity alert chirped softly. Kalen pulled away, checking the readout. "They're sweeping the nebula's perimeter. Haven't committed to entering yet." "They won't," Alara said confidently. "Too risky for a luxury vessel." Valerius wouldn't sacrifice his precious ship, but she had underestimated her ex-husband's determination. Hours later, the sensors detected the pursuit vessel entering the nebula's edge. "They're following our ion trail," Kalen said grimly. "It's faint, but they have military-grade sensors. Then we need to move. Make for the Thornback current. The charged particles will mask our trail." As they powered up and left their hiding place, a weapons lock alarm sounded. The pursuing ship had spotted them. "Hang on," Kalen growled, throwing the Nomad into a sharp dive. Energy blasts streaked past them, superheating the nebula gases and creating blinding flashes. The ship bucked and rolled as Kalen pushed it through maneuvers it was never designed to perform. Alara clung to her seat, calculating trajectories and calling out navigational hazards. "We need something to disrupt their targeting systems," she shouted over the strain of the engines. Kalen's eyes lit with sudden inspiration. "The mining charges in the cargo hold. You're carrying explosives?" "Part of a legitimate delivery," he said with the ghost of a smile. Their proximity detonated. Understanding dawned. "If we drop them in our wake." "Exactly." Kalen programmed the autopilot for a precarious moment while he raced to the cargo hold. He returned minutes later with 3 metal canisters, each the size of his forearm. "When I give the word, release the cargo bay door," he instructed, securing the charges. Alara positioned her hands over the controls, watching as the pursuing ship closed the gap between them. "They're launching boarding drones." "Now!" Kalen shouted. She slammed the release, and the charges tumbled into space behind them. Kalen yanked the controls hard, sending them into a steep climb away from the projected blast zone. The charges detonated in a cascading series of explosions, igniting the surrounding nebula gases. A massive shockwave rolled outward, catching the pursuit vessel and its deployed drones. On the view screen, they watched the smaller drones disintegrate instantly. The larger ship tumbled end over end, its stabilizers overwhelmed. "Direct hit to their propulsion system," Alara reported, analyzing the sensor readings. "They're dead in space." Kalen wasted no time. Setting course out of the nebula, maximum speed, they emerged from the cosmic storm. Hours later, both exhausted but triumphant, the damaged pursuit vessel hadn't followed. "We did it," Alara breathed, slumping in her chair. "For now," Kalen cautioned. "But Valerius knows you're alive now, and he knows you're with me." The implications settled heavily between them. This wasn't over. "We need to disappear," Alara said firmly. "Somewhere beyond his reach." Kalen nodded slowly. "I know a place." The blue-green planet hung like a jewel against the black velvet of space. From orbit, its single small continent was visible among vast oceans, wrapped in swirling white clouds. "Eden Station," Kalen said, as the Nomad approached a small orbital platform. "Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's a sanctuary for people who need to disappear." The station was modest, little more than a docking ring and habitation module. It served as a gateway to the planet below, which Kalen explained was a colony established by refugees from corporate wars decades earlier. "How do you know about this place?" Alara asked as they prepared to dock. "I helped transport supplies here after I escaped the labor camp," Kalen replied. "They offered me a place, but—" He trailed off, his eyes distant. "But you weren't ready to stop running," Alara finished for him. He met her gaze. "Something like that." The colony welcomed them with cautious hospitality. Suspicion was a survival trait in the outer systems, but so was solidarity. The settlement was small, perhaps 300 people living in harmony with the lush environment. Simple dwellings nestled among trees, hydroponic gardens flourished in clearings, and a small spaceport served their minimal off-world needs. They were assigned a vacant cabin on the settlement's edge. It was rustic by Lyran standards, a single room with basic amenities, powered by solar collectors and constructed from local timber. But to Alara, it represented something she'd thought forever lost: safety. In the weeks that followed, they established a routine. Kalen worked in the spaceport, maintaining the colony's small fleet of shuttles and teaching younger residents the intricacies of spacecraft engineering. Alara found purpose in the community gardens, her diplomatic training unexpectedly useful in mediating the small disputes that arose in any close-knit community. At night, they returned to their shared cabin, their relationship evolving in small, careful steps. Kalen never pressed for more than Alara was ready to give. Sometimes they spoke late into the night, sharing memories both painful and precious. Other times they sat in companionable silence, reading or simply existing in the same space without fear. The first time, Kalen touched her with intent beyond friendship, a gentle hand cupping her face. Alara flinched involuntarily. He withdrew immediately, apology in his eyes. "No," she said, reaching for his hand and bringing it back to her cheek. "It's not you. It's just been a long time since touch meant anything but pain." "We have time," he said simply. "All the time you need." Slowly, the walls around her heart began to crumble. She learned to recognize the difference between the phantom hands of memory and Kalen's careful touch. He, in turn, revealed more of himself. The guilt he carried for surviving when his family hadn't, his anger at a system that treated people as disposable resources, his fear that he was too damaged for real connection. 6 months after their arrival, a colony-wide celebration marked the harvest season. The settlement square was transformed with strings of lights and makeshift tables laden with food. Music played, people danced, and for the first time, Alara felt like part of something whole again. Standing at the edge of the festivities, watching Kalen deep in conversation with a group of young mechanics, she was struck by how much had changed. The constant fear that had been her companion for years had faded to a dull wariness. The nightmares came less frequently. She had begun to think not just of survival, but of living. Kalen caught her watching and excused himself, crossing to her side. "Everything all right?" "Yes," she said, surprising herself with how true it felt. "Actually, yes." He smiled, one of his rare, full smiles that transformed his weathered face and reached his eyes. "Good." They danced that night, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. When Kalen kissed her under the stars, surrounded by their newfound community, Alara felt something long dormant flutter to life inside her. Hope. Later, in their cabin, barriers fell away. His hands, calloused from years of mechanical work, were gentle as they traced the map of scars across her body. Her past was written on her skin, but for the first time, she didn't feel defined by it. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her neck. In answer, she guided his hand to the brand on her shoulder, Valerius' mark of ownership, and covered it with her own. "This doesn't own me anymore," she said. "I choose you. I choose us." Their lovemaking was tender, healing, an act of reclamation rather than possession. Afterward, lying in the quiet darkness, Alara felt tears on her cheeks. Not tears of pain or shame, but of release. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she confessed, her head resting on Kalen's chest. "I never thought I'd feel whole." He stroked her hair, his voice rough with emotion. "You were never broken, Alara. Damaged, maybe. We both were. But never broken." The warning came 3 months later. A supply ship brought news that questions were being asked in the central systems about Eden's location. Someone with substantial resources was hunting for a missing Lyran noblewoman and the cargo captain who had disappeared with her. "He won't stop," Alara said, pacing their cabin after the colony council meeting. "Valerius can't stand to lose, and in his mind, I belong to him." "We could run again," Kalen suggested, though his tone said he knew it wasn't a real solution. Alara shook her head. "I'm tired of running. This is our home now." She gestured to the life they'd built together, the small treasures they collected, the artwork she'd begun creating again, the plans for expanding their cabin. "I won't let him take this too." "Then we fight," Kalen said simply. "Not just us, the whole colony. Everyone here has something to protect." The council agreed. Eden had been founded on the principle of mutual protection. No one would be abandoned to their fate. Defensive measures were implemented. Early warning systems, evacuation protocols, even modest weapons placements around the spaceport. Life continued, tinged now with vigilance. Alara refused to surrender to fear again. She channeled her energy into strengthening the community, organizing additional training, establishing communication protocols, ensuring the most vulnerable residents had assigned protectors. Her diplomatic skills proved invaluable in balancing security with the colony's peaceful ethos. "You're good at this," Kalen observed one evening, watching her outline contingency plans with the council. "Leadership. I was raised for it," she replied with a small smile. "Just not the way my parents intended." The attack, when it came, wasn't what they expected. No military assault, no dramatic confrontation. Instead, a single luxury yacht entered the system, broadcasting peaceful intentions and requesting emergency landing clearance due to a life support malfunction. Alara knew immediately. It's him. Kalen's face hardened. I'll alert the council. No, she interrupted, a calm certainty settling over her. Let him land. Alara. Trust me. She took his hands in hers. I need to end this. On my terms, not his. Kalen searched her face, then nodded reluctantly. Not alone. Never alone again, she promised. They met Valeria's ship at the landing pad, flanked by a discreet security team from the colony. The yacht was ostentatious, gleaming with expensive finishes that looked obscenely out of place in a modest spaceport. When the hatch opened, Valerius emerged exactly as Alara remembered him. Tall, immaculately dressed, his aristocratic features set in an expression of perpetual disdain. Seeing him now, she wondered how she had ever found him impressive. His eyes fell on her, widening slightly at her transformed appearance. Gone was the broken slave. In her place stood a woman with clear eyes and straight shoulders, dressed simply but with dignity. My dear Alara, he said, his cultured voice dripping with false concern. What a relief to find you alive. I've been searching everywhere since discovering your unfortunate sail. Lord Valerius, she replied, her voice steady. Your concern comes rather late. He descended the ramp, flanked by two bodyguards whose hands hovered near concealed weapons. His smile didn't reach his cold eyes. A terrible misunderstanding, I assure you. Those responsible have been punished. He glanced dismissively at Kalen. I see you found accommodation in my absence. But it's time to come home now. Your position in my household awaits. Alara laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to startle Valerius. Home? Your household? I am home, Valerius. And I belong to no one but myself. Valerius' facade cracked slightly. Don't be absurd. You're my wife. Ex-wife. Kalen interjected quietly. The moment you sold her, you legally dissolved any claim. Valerius ignored him, focusing on Alara. You know things, my dear, state secrets, family matters. I can't simply allow you to live freely with such knowledge. Ah, now we reach the truth, Alara said. You're afraid of what I might reveal. About the genetic tampering in your bloodline that you've hidden for generations? About your illegal weapons deals with the Orion Collective? Or perhaps your arrangement with the Genetic Council to suppress research that would make your family's superiority obsolete? Valerius' face darkened. You ungrateful. I've recorded everything, Valerius, she continued calmly. Every detail I witnessed during our marriage. It's all documented and secured with multiple fail-safes. If anything happens to me or anyone I care about, every system authority from here to the Central Worlds will receive the complete record. You're bluffing, he hissed, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Am I? You taught me well, husband. Always maintain leverage. Alara stepped closer, lowering her voice. Leave now. Never return. Never seek me out again. In exchange, your secrets remain safe. Valerius glanced at the colony security team, at Kalen's steady presence beside Alara, at the community members who had gradually gathered a distance, watching protectively. He was on foreign ground, outnumbered, and Alara held the ultimate weapon, truth. This isn't over, he said, his voice barely controlled. It is, Alara replied firmly. You have no power here. For a moment, she thought he might attempt something desperate. Then, with a last venomous glare, he turned and reboarded his ship. The colony maintained alert status until the yacht had left the system entirely. That night, Alara sat on the porch of their cabin, watching twin moons rise over the tree line. Kalen joined her, setting a cup of tea beside her. Would you really have released his secrets? He asked. Yes, she said without hesitation, but not because of vengeance. Because people deserve to know the truth about those who control their lives. She leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. But it's better this way. No more bloodshed. Do you think he's really gone? From our lives? Yes. His pride won't let him return after being outmaneuvered. She smiled wryly. And he knows I wasn't bluffing about the records. Kalen wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You were magnificent. In the year that followed, Eden Colony thrived. With the threat removed, the community expanded its operations, establishing cautious trade relationships with other independent settlements. Alera's diplomatic skills proved invaluable, and she found herself leading negotiations that benefited not just Eden, but a growing network of free colonies. Kalen continued working with ships, but now focused on designing specialized craft suited to Eden's unique needs. He found unexpected joy in teaching, passing his knowledge to a new generation of engineers and pilots who had never known corporate bondage. Their cabin grew with their ambitions. A second room, a workshop for Kalen, a small studio where Alera created art for the first time since her youth. Simple pleasures became treasured rituals. Morning walks through the forest, community meals with friends, quiet evenings planning their shared future. On the anniversary of their arrival on Eden, Kalen presented Alera with a gift, a delicate pendant crafted from Nomad's salvaged navigational crystal, set in local silver. "It guided us here," he said, fastening it around her neck. "To home." Alera touched it gently, then reached up to trace the faded scar on Kalen's cheek. "We guided each other," she corrected softly. That night, as they lay together watching starlight filter through the window, Kalen asked the question that had been on his mind for months. "Do you ever regret it? Not returning to Lyra 7, not reclaiming your position?" Alera was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes I miss certain things, the libraries, the concert halls, the ease of a privileged life." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "But regret? No. That life was a gilded cage, even before Valerius. Here I'm free. Here I matter for who I am, not for my bloodline or political value." She laid her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Besides, what would I go back to? The noble houses of Lyra have short memories for their own crimes, but long ones for embarrassment. I would forever be the disgraced diplomat, the defective wife who dared to survive." "You're much more than a survivor," Kalen murmured into her hair. 2 years into their life on Eden, the colony celebrated the completion of a new community center, a soaring structure that combined local materials with salvaged spacecraft components, symbolizing the colony's unique heritage. Alera had helped design the interior spaces, creating areas for education, healthcare, and cultural events. At the dedication ceremony, she stood back, watching with quiet pride as children raced through the open doors. A hand slipped into hers. Talia, a young girl who had been among the most traumatized refugees when she'd arrived 6 months earlier. Now she smiled up at Alera with growing confidence. "It's beautiful," the child said simply. "Yes, it is," Alera agreed, squeezing the small hand in hers. Later, she found Kalen in deep conversation with an elderly engineer who had once designed starships for the Central Systems before fleeing corporate exploitation. Their heads were bent over diagrams spread across a table, animated expressions revealing shared excitement. "Breakthrough?" she asked, approaching them. Kalen looked up, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Possibly. Galen here thinks we can modify the atmospheric filters to extract rare elements from Eden's upper atmosphere. If it works, we could manufacture critical components instead of importing them." "Self-sufficiency," Alera noted, understanding immediately the implications for the colony's future security. "Exactly." Kalen rolled up the diagrams. "It would mean freedom from dependency on outside trade for essential technology." That night, as a gentle rain pattered against their roof, they talked late into the evening about possibilities. Not just for themselves, but for Eden, for other free colonies, for a future where people could choose their own paths without corporate or noble manipulation. "Sometimes I wonder," Alera said, her voice thoughtful in the darkness, "if what happened to me was, in some strange way, necessary. If I'd remained in that privileged bubble, would I ever have understood the reality of how most people live? Would I have cared enough to act?" "You can't believe you deserved what Valerius did," Kalen said, tension in his voice. "No, never that," she assured him. "But perhaps the universe has strange ways of placing us where we need to be. If I hadn't been cast out, I would never have found you. never have found this place, this purpose. Kalen was silent for a long moment before responding. I used to curse the universe for taking my family. Now I wonder if their deaths gave me the freedom to save you. Not just me, Alara whispered. Look at what you've done here. The shuttles you've repaired, the defense systems you've designed, the young people you've taught. You've helped build something that will outlast both of us. She thought about the children of Eden, growing up without corporate brands or noble houses defining their worth. Children like Talia, who would never know the touch of an ownership mark or the shame of being deemed defective for minor genetic variations. We can't have children of our own, she said, touching the old surgical scar on her abdomen. But in a way, we have hundreds. In the morning, they walked together to the edge of the settlement, where the forest met carefully tended fields. The rising sun turned dew to diamonds on wide leaves, and birds called from flowering branches. In the distance, Eden's small spaceport was visible, no longer just an escape route, but a connection to a growing network of free settlements and independent traders. Alara leaned against Kalen, watching a group of colony children helping with the morning harvest. I used to believe that power came from position, from bloodlines, from control over others, she mused. Now I understand it comes from building something worth protecting. Worth living for, Kalen added, his arms secure around her waist. A young engineer approached, carrying a communication device. Captain Kalen, the Council would like your input on the new defense grid calibrations. Kalen nodded. I'll be there shortly. The young woman turned to Alara. An ambassador, when you have time, the Proxima delegation has arrived. They're asking specifically for you to join the trade discussions. Alara smiled at the title the colonists had bestowed upon her, a recognition of her natural role as bridge builder between communities. Tell them I'll be there within the hour. As the engineer departed, Kalen chuckled. Ambassador Alara has a certain ring to it, as does Captain Kalen, she replied, nudging him playfully. Though I notice you still haven't officially accepted the title. Old habits, he shrugged. Titles meant trouble in my previous life. Here, they're just recognition of who we already are, Alara said. No power plays, no political maneuvering, just people acknowledging each other's strengths. They began walking toward the settlement, their steps naturally falling into sync. The path before them wound through gardens and workshops, past homes and communal spaces, toward the heart of the community they'd helped nurture. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over, Alara said, pausing to watch a flock of native birds rise from a nearby field. When Valerius sentenced me to that auction block, I prayed only for a quick death. Kalen's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with practiced ease. And now, she turned to him, her face serene in the morning light. The scars were still visible, on her skin, in the shadows that sometimes crossed her eyes, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of the map that had led her here, to this moment, to this man. Now, she said, I pray for a long life. With you, with our community, building something that matters. She reached up to touch the navigational crystal pendant that rarely left her neck. I went from being property to being free, from being isolated to being connected, from merely surviving to truly living. A bell sounded from the community center, calling council members to the meeting with the Proxima delegation. Soon they would separate to attend to their respective duties, Kalen to the defense systems, Alara to the diplomatic negotiations. But first, he pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future. When they parted, his eyes held hers, communication passing between them without words. The understanding of two people who had seen the darkest aspects of humanity and chosen to build something better. Not perfect, not without struggle, but meaningful, real. Shall we? Alara gestured toward the waiting community. Together, Kalen nodded, and they walked forward, leaving footprints side by side on the path toward home.